right, so we're going to talk about some accessory organs in the digestive system. So this lecture will focus on the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. And it's going to be a little bit long because I really wasn't sure how to break this up, so we're just going to do it in one big lecture. So I'll try not to be too long-winded. So where we're focusing on, again, so you think about the alimentary canal, the digestive tract, the GI tract, it's one long tube from the mouth to the anus. That includes your pharynx, your esophagus, your stomach, your small and large intestines, and then out through the anus. But there are organs that help the digestive system, providing enzymes and things like that that you need to digest the food that's going to go through the system. And so the three accessory organs we're going to focus on now are the liver, which is here, the gallbladder, which is this green sac here, and the pancreas. You've already learned a little bit about the pancreas with the endocrine system. The pancreas is both an endocrine organ and a digestive organ, so it has those accessory functions for digestion as well. This pink tube here, this is the duodenum or the duodenum. It depends on where you went to school. They're both correct, so duodenum or duodenum, which is the uppermost portion of the small intestine. So that's what you're looking at. We'll have another video for lab information, but just briefly I want to go over a little bit of the main structures for you to know. The liver, its job is to make bile, and we'll talk about what that is, and the gallbladder's job is to store it and then basically contract when that bile is needed for digestion. So you've got several ducts, and so you have a left and right and left hepatic ducts, and those form the common hepatic duct. So they come together and make a common duct. And then you have this tube here called the cystic duct, and the cystic duct is the one that goes between really the liver and the gallbladder, so that when the liver makes bile, it has a way to get into the gallbladder. These ducts then run kind of behind the pancreas. You have some pancreatic ducts that run in the pancreas, and these are going to come together and secrete their pancreatic and bile juices out into the small intestine. So this is the common place for both the liver, things that are made by the liver and stored by the gallbladder, and things made by the pancreas to enter into the small intestine. There's also a way for the pancreatic juices to come in right here. All right, so again, we'll have another anatomy lesson in another video, but I just want to make sure that when I say liver, gallbladder, pancreas, you have a visualization of what I'm talking about and kind of how they're connected. Okay, so again, more detail in the lab portion. The liver is made up of 4 lobes, and if you look at the liver, looking at it from a front view, you have your right lobe and your left lobe. If you turn it around, look at it from the back side, this is your right lobe, your left lobe. Then it has one that's kind of shaped like a tail, so it's called the caudate, as in caudal, as in tail, and then one that's got 4 sides, so we call that the quadrate. So those are the 4 lobes. And so we're going to talk about lobes and lobules, so I want to make sure that those terms don't get you confused. That's why I wanted to show it to you. So 4 lobes of the liver, and again, its digestive function is to make bile. And bile is something that we use to break down fat. Now that's not the only thing the liver does, okay? That's just the only thing it does for the digestive system. The liver is an amazing organ. I wish we could spend a lot more time on it than we do. But again, there's just so many days in the class, and so we have to cut things somewhere. But it does do a lot of things, and so you might have a question on your exam, well, all that apply. The liver can do all of these, which of these following? It has a role in sugar storage and sugar release. So it can produce glycogen from glucose. So if you remember, glucose is one of those single sugars, and you can link that together and store it in the form of glycogen. The liver does that. When you need glucose released into your blood, we can break down the glycogen back into glucose. It's able to convert things that are not sugars into sugars. So it converts non-carbohydrates into sugar. It can help you with your oxidizing your fatty acids. It can make lipoproteins and phospholipids and cholesterol. So you can see if someone had liver damage, you could really be in a world of hurt. Things could really be going bad for you if you have any kind of liver issues, because the liver does so many things. It also works by deaminating amino acids. It forms urea. It makes some of your plasma proteins. It helps convert some amino acids to different amino acids. It stores glycogen. It stores vitamins like A, D, B12, iron. It plays a role in getting rid of old red blood cells through phagocytosis and foreign substances, so it kind of plays an immune type response. It helps to filter the blood and get toxins out of the blood. We talked about when we did blood flow, and we talked about how when the blood returns from the small intestine and the large intestine and the spleen, it's got to go through the liver first, through that hepatic portal system, so that it can be cleaned before you send that blood to the inferior vena cava and back to the heart. So it does a ton of stuff. It's really a pretty cool organ. But the only one we're really done to talk about in detail now is the fact that it makes bile, because that's the only digestive function, and we're talking about the digestive system. All right, so the liver is an amazing organ, and those lobes are then divided into things called lobules. Okay, so these are small hexagonal shaped structures. So each one of these is a lobule, those little hexagons, and they each have a vein, a central vein, and then they are separated by this connective tissue. Okay, and these lobules are made up of hepatocytes. And so hepato is anything, when you use hepato, that means liver. So cyte means cell, so liver cells. So your hepatocytes are your liver cells, and their job is to filter and process nutrient-rich blood. So these are the cells that are going to do all those jobs for you. Okay? So if you blow up a lobule, this is what it looks like. And so you'll remember you have a portal vein, the hepatic portal system, that's going to bring blood back from the small intestine, large intestine, spleen, stomach. And then that's going to go into these hepatocytes. And you've got these sinusoids inside these hepatocytes, so that blood can filter through all these hepatocytes. So as it's filtering through the lobules, it's going to be in contact with all these hepatocytes, and the hepatocytes are going to be able to do their thing. And then that blood will then enter in to this central, I'm using blue, that's probably a bad choice. I just realized that. Let's see if I can change colors. Let's see if I can go with orange. So the blood will go through this central vein and then back out to the veins that go to the hepatic vein. And take it back to the hepatic vein, back to the inferior vena cava, and then back to the heart. So you can see it's almost like a sponge. So the blood is going to be flowing in through these lobules. The hepatocytes will be in contact with this blood, and they can do their job. It's also rich in lymphatic vessels as well. So you can see there's little green dots all through here. So it's richly has a rich supply of lymphatic vessels as well. So these hepatocytes, they're pretty cool cells. So I like to call them super cells because they do so much. They have a lot of rough and smooth ER and Golgis and peroxisomes and mitochondria. So they're busy little cells. They can process bloodborne nutrients. They can store fat-soluble vitamins. They can do the detoxification, and they can make almost 1 liter of bile per day, which is kind of a neat thing because a lot of times when we think about a cell, we think of them as being very specialized. They kind of do one thing, like a red blood cell carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. Your skin cells, they protect and form a barrier for your skin. So there are cells that do more than one job, but hepatocytes do a lot of jobs. So again, I like to call them kind of the super cells of the body because they're not specialized like so many other cells that you find in your body. So if you have a problem with the liver, some of the things that can happen are called hepatitis, which is inflammation of the liver. Usually that's going to be some kind of infection. It could be viral. It could be drug toxicity, and you also see this when people go out and they use wild mushrooms. Sometimes when the wild mushroom poison will affect the liver. With infections, there are some vaccines that you can take to kind of prevent hepatitis, and I recommend that everyone get their hepatitis vaccines, especially if you're going to be involved in medicine. Hep B will help protect you from bloodborne hepatitis. So obviously if you're working in medicine, you're going to be exposed to blood. It also will help prevent Hep B, which has can be carried through or transferred through sexual activity. And then Hep A, hepatitis A vaccine, this is the one for food. So especially if you tend to travel throughout the world, maybe in underdeveloped countries, a lot of times you can get hepatitis from eating underwashed foods and things like that. And even if you just like to, if you like to eat raw fruits and vegetables all the time, it's a good idea to have your Hep A. It's just an extra way to protect yourself from hepatitis. You don't really want to get hepatitis if you can avoid it. Cirrhosis is another thing that happens. This is going to be a progressive chronic inflammation of the liver. It can be due to chronic hepatitis. So if you have hepatitis and you can't get rid of it, it can cause cirrhosis. A common reason for people to get cirrhosis is alcoholism. You may have heard someone has cirrhosis and you find out that they've been an alcoholic all their life. Alcohol does damage the liver. Typically in cirrhosis, what happens is the liver becomes fatty and you wind up with portal hypertension. So that whole system just is not effective anymore. It doesn't work very well. So those people, all those things the hepatocytes could do, they start to shut down. They don't work as well. Toxins build up and things like that. If you have cirrhosis, liver transplants will work. Unfortunately, as you probably are aware, it's hard to get transplants of anything, so because livers are scarce. So if you're not an organ donor, I encourage you to become an organ donor because you can save a life one day. So what the liver does, again, for digestion is make bile. And so bile is a yellow-green alkaline solution. It has bile salts, and what they can do is emulsify and help break down and absorb fat. So when you eat a fatty meal, the gallbladder is going to contract, release that bile into the small intestine and help you break that down. People who have had their gallbladder removed, they're still going to be able to release bile from their liver, but it's not stored, so you don't get that big bolus of bile that's released by the gallbladder. So a lot of times they just have to quit eating fatty foods because it just gives them diarrhea. It just goes straight through them. So it's very important in allowing you to be able to eat fat. It also contains bilirubin, and we talked about that earlier. That's what gives the brown color to feces. It's from the breakdown of those red blood cells. And we talked about that in our blood unit. And it contains things like cholesterols and phospholipids and some electrolytes. So again, the gallbladder is just an accessory organ, and it doesn't make anything. So it does not make bile. So if you've seen that somewhere, that's not right. It stores bile. That's what it does. So the liver makes it, the gallbladder stores it, and then releases it as needed. It's kind of a thin balloon-shaped sac, and it's really easy to see if you're doing a dissection. It's kind of on the back side of the liver. It's easy to find. And it will store the bile, but it also concentrates it by absorbing water and ions. So the bile that the liver sends to the gallbladder will then be concentrated so that when it does contract and send the bile to the small intestine, it's real concentrated, and that way it can work more effectively. So that's one thing that goes on in the gallbladder, which is another reason if you have your gallbladder removed and your liver is the only source of bile, you're sending kind of a dilute bile out into the small intestine, and it's just not as effective. This is just kind of an FYI, if you wind up in surgery situation or maybe an autopsy situation, or maybe you're doing a cadaver lab, if someone has maybe had dementia or something where they've kind of quit eating, or maybe terminal end-stage cancer, but they've kind of quit eating toward the last couple of weeks of their life, a lot of times that gallbladder will be huge because the liver has still been making all that bile and the gallbladder's been storing it, but they haven't been eating, so it hasn't been released. So I've seen that several times when I've done cadaver labs, just an amazingly large gallbladder, and it's kind of I wonder how this person died, and you come to find out that they then died of a terminal illness and then basically didn't eat at the end. And they're usually really skinny. You can tell that they've lost a lot of weight, but their gallbladders are really huge. Anyway, that's just an aside, just a cool thing to know if you happen to be going into medicine and you get to do any cadaver labs. So the gallbladder is muscular, so it is able to contract, and it will release the bile through that cystic duct. So remember, the cystic duct is a two-way valve. It goes both ways. So the cystic duct allows bile to go from the liver to the gallbladder. I need to change colors again. What color should I use this time? So this way, and then when it's time to release the bile, it goes that way. And that's also kind of an interesting thing. You don't really see too many two-way streets in the body. Typically things are, unidirectional. They have afferent and efferent directions, and things are going one way, but the cystic duct goes in two directions. Here's your common hepatic duct, which joins the left and right hepatic ducts. The cystic duct and common hepatic duct come together, or what did I say? The cystic duct and common duct join here to form the bile duct, and then the bile duct and the pancreatic duct come together to empty out into the small intestine. All right. So how is bile regulated? It's regulated by something called secretin, and secretin is from the intestinal cells, once they're, how should I say that? Secretin is from intestinal cells that have been exposed to hydrochloric acid and chyme. So remember, when the stomach is churning, it makes that chyme, and then the chyme is going to go into the duodenum of the small intestine. Well, that's going to have hydrochloric acid in it because it just came from the stomach, and it's going to have fat in it, because especially if you ate a fatty meal, that stimulates the cells inside the intestine to make this secretin. And so that will be a stimulus for bile secretion. Okay. Typically that sphincter, this sphincter here, the hepatopancreatic sphincter, stays closed unless digestion is active. So if you haven't eaten a meal, it's going to be closed. After you eat a meal, it's going to open and start to allow that bile to be released from the gallbladder. So again, the gallbladder has to contract in order to send that bile to the small intestine. What causes the gallbladder to contract? It's under the control of something called CCK, or cholecystokinin. Okay, that's also from intestinal cells that have been exposed to that acid and fatty chyme. So you've eaten a meal, so these cells have been exposed to fat and chyme, and they're going to send out cholecystokinin and cause the gallbladder to contract. There is also some vagal stimulation. So you remember, the vagus nerve is cranial nerve number, come on guys, vagus nerve is cranial nerve number 10, right? So if you think about that's parasympathetic, so rest and digest, so it's in charge of digestion, so it's going to work as well. CCK has some other jobs as well we'll talk about. It is involved in the secretion of the pancreatic juices, and it causes that hepatopancreatic sphincter to relax. So it relaxes, that allows the pancreatic juices and bile to be released into the small intestine. So what happens, what are some things that can happen with the gallbladder? Common thing is gallstones. People who have high cholesterol, maybe not enough bile salts, you'll get this kind of crystallization and formation of these gallstones called biliary calculi. And if they're big enough, they can be painful. They can also obstruct the duct so that the bile can't get out. Sometimes people even get jaundice as a side effect of that. When it contracts, because you've formed these gallstones, and they can be sharp, kind of like kidney stones, they can cause a lot of pain. So they can go in, they can try to break them up with ultrasound, which is called lithotripsy. They may use lasers, or they may do surgery. So it's a very common thing for people to do, to have to get gallstones taken out. Or if there's some other damage, they may just take the whole gallbladder out. Just kind of depends on how many and how large your gallstones are. So that takes us to the pancreas, which is the other accessory organ. And remember, it has endocrine and exocrine. So the endocrine, we talked about with the endocrine system, those pancreatic islets with those alpha cells and beta cells making insulin and glucagon, which play a role in sugar control. So we know about that. And the exocrine function, which is the one that makes the digestive juices. So the exocrine portion is that portion that's involved in digestion. All right. And so that comes from the acini or cells, and they make the pancreatic juices. And one of the things that these cells do is they have these granules that will contain proenzymes. So what the pancreas does is it makes things that can be sent out to the small intestine, but then need to be activated in order to work. So you kind of have these things that are ready to go. You secrete these out, then they're activated, and then they can do their job. You make a lot of pancreatic juice, about a liter and a half a day. It's watery. It's going to be alkaline, which, okay, so think about that. This is one of those critical thinking things I probably shouldn't have to tell you, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So if things are coming from the stomach, remember HCl is a what? Acid, and you've got that nice mucosal layer inside of the stomach, right? And as that chyme, that's acid chyme, is coming into the small intestine, we need to neutralize that. All right, so one of the things that the pancreas does is has that basic pH to neutralize that acidic chyme. All right, so because your small intestine, its job is to absorb those nutrients. Okay, so we can't have a mucosal layer that's blocking like you did in the stomach. Okay, so you've got to get rid of that acid so that the absorption can take place. It also has electrolytes, primarily bicarbonate, which is a base, which again is going to help with that neutralizing of the hydrochloric acid. It contains enzymes. It has enzymes for breaking down protein called proteases, enzymes for breaking down starches called amylases, so starches are sugars, lipases for fat, and nucleases for nucleic acids like DNA and RNA. Amylases, lipases, and nucleases, they're actually secreted in their active form, so they're ready to go, whereas the proteases have to be activated in the duodenum. So they're secreted out in an inactive form and have to be turned on in the small intestine. So example of how that works, these proteases that have to be activated, they're going to be secreted from the pancreas into the small intestine. You're going to have some cells, some epithelial cells lining the small intestine that will have a peptidase that will turn trypsinogen into trypsin, and then trypsin will then turn chymotrypsinogen and carboxypeptidase into chymotrypsin and carboxypeptidase. So you have this kind of cascade reaction with the end result getting these two proteases that are now activated, and they can be used to break down proteins. So again, the lipases, amylases, and nucleases go in to the small intestine ready to go. You have to turn on the proteases. Okay. So what regulates pancreatic secretion? Back to CCK and secretin. The CCK induces the secretion of those pancreatic juices by the Acini cells. The secretin causes secretion of that bicarbonate-rich pancreatic juice. Okay, so these make the enzymes. That's going to be where your enzymes come from, and then you're going to have secretin causing the bicarbonate. So you're going to get your enzymes and your acid neutralization. So two different hormones doing two different things. And again, because it's rest and digest, your vagus nerve also plays a minor role. So this is kind of putting it all together. This is kind of, we're going to go stepwise so we can kind of get the broad picture of how all these organs are working together in digestion. So we have our stomach here, so we have our chyme, we have our liver, gallbladder here, and then pancreas. So step one is you're going to eat your food. You're going to eat that food. It's going to be churned up and delivered as chyme. Chyme is going to enter into the duodenum, right? So there it goes. There are cells, endocrine cells inside the small intestine that cause the release of those two hormones, CCK and secretin. Okay, so here we go. The CCK is red, the secretin is yellow. They go into the bloodstream. All right, they travel through the bloodstream. Remember, you always have to remember blood flow. That's why we covered how you can trace a drop of blood so that you can understand how hormones work, and it comes into play here again. Flows into the blood. It then will go to the pancreas, causing the pancreas to secrete enzymes, the CCK, and the secretin to secrete the bicarbonate. All right, so you're going to have the stimulation of the pancreas to secrete out the enzymes and the bicarbonate. It's going to then, your liver, with what it's doing at the same time, it is going to be producing more and more bile, so it's going to be stimulated to make more and more bile to be produced and being able to go to the gallbladder to be stored and concentrated. The CCK is going to cause the gallbladder to contract and that sphincter to relax. So if you contract the gallbladder, open up the sphincter, the bile can enter into the duodenum. And then again, you're going to have a little bit of nervous system stimulation that will also cause the gallbladder to contract. So that's a lot. It's a great slide. Just think about, I haven't even made the test yet, but think about how, maybe some ordering questions, all that apply questions. Definitely understand the role of CCK and secretin, where it comes from, and what organs it causes to do something, and what does it cause the pancreas to do, and what do they cause the gallbladder to do. All right, so that is the end of the accessory organs, and next stop will be the small intestine. Thank you.